Now you're saying you're willing to fix this car this weekend and pay for the parts?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
And what exactly do you want in return?
You don't have to do anything. Just pretend. Pretend to be my girlfriend for a couple of months.
So you think that you can buy me for $1,500?
No, not buy you, just rent you. It'll make me popular.
All right, so for those who aren't familiar with that clip is from, oh my gosh, a classic movie that I loved down when I was a little girl. Love Don't Cost a Thing. And I love this movie so much because Christina Milian did her big one as far as representation, her aesthetic, the curly hair, the outfits. Oh my gosh, she just ate down. Still one of my favorite movies to this day because she carried the aesthetic. But nevertheless, though, in this analysis, the reason why I want to use Christina Milian's character Paris in the movie as a muse is because typically when we assess the quote-unquote popular and pretty girl, and of course pretty is subjective, but clearly, as we can see here, Christina Milian is breathtaking, and she's still breathtaking to this day. But nevertheless, the quote-unquote popular and pretty girl, we typically view them through the lens of being the quote-unquote mean girl or the predator in a sense. But this movie depicts that sometimes the popular and pretty girl is often the prey, meaning that people who are either in close proximity to them or they have direct association with the quote-unquote popular and pretty girl oftentimes views that association and that proximity solely through a transactional lens. So there are instances where people will get close to somebody who they feel like has some kind of privilege only to take from them with no intentions of providing reciprocity back. So with Paris Morgan being our muse in this analysis today, I want to depict how sometimes the popular and pretty girl is the prey. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into this analysis. So when we look at Paris's character at the surface level, she hit off all the boxes as far as being the quote-unquote popular girl. So she had the it friend group. She was obviously gorgeous. She had a boyfriend at the time in grade school who also had a certain level of status, whatever that meant for us when we were in grade school. If I'm not mistaken, she also came from a relatively affluent background. Like she had a car. I think her family was pretty well off. She was the captain of the drill team. Just everything was on the up and up, at least at the surface level. However, what was interesting once, she agreed to be in a quote unquote relationship with Alvin, which was the person depicted earlier in the analysis, in order to get her car fixed, she was able to disclose to him that she actually had a completely different goal and like a dream for herself. And she ended up saying something like she wished she could just go somewhere where no one knew her and grow dreadlocks and just dedicate herself to poetry. And it was interesting to hear the dream and her aspirations were so different from who she was portraying herself to be when she was in school, and she almost had an image to uphold. And I think that this depicted the fact that all that glitters isn't necessarily gold. And it sounded like she was displaying, or at the very least disclosing and confiding in Alvin, that sometimes being popular felt like a prison.
It's so good. Instead of this whole drill team, Drew Hilton's girl thing, what I really, really always dream about is just going somewhere. Somewhere where nobody knows me. Just being this girl with like crazy cool dreads and a guitar. Whatever, it's really dumb.
So as we could see in that clip, she was almost having like a moment of escape, when she went to the poetry club and she talked about how she wished that she could just go somewhere where no one knew her and play guitar and not have to worry about upholding certain expectations or, being consistent with images and preconceived notions that people have of her. And it's interesting because even though in that clip, Alvin was encouraging it, he still benefited from her, or at the least being associated with her when she was popular. And this even took a turn for the worse once he started to, I guess, get a big head and started to feel himself and started to treat her kind of bad.
I need to talk to you.
Don't you see grown men are talking here? Huh? Anyway, saying, Ohio players.
Al, we need
We,
to talk.
what's up with all this we stuff? This ain't French class. Ain't no we. Free agent now.
That was cruel.
Sometimes you gotta be cruel to be kind.
In that clip right there, it really stresses how important it is for you to understand that even if you don't necessarily put yourself on a pedestal, it doesn't mean that the people around you don't. And what they may be picking up on is you may have favor in a particular area, or, you might have some positive attributes that draws attention to you. And just because you don't necessarily, stress over those things or you don't make it the center of your life, it doesn't mean that other people don't make those things the center of their life. So if people associate themselves with you, you have to be cautious of those who are doing it for a transactional purpose, or they're trying to knock you off of the pedestal to replace you. But to better explain what I mean by this, I'm actually going to read from a section in this book to highlight the point that I'm making a little bit more. So the first section I want to read from, and it's all going to be in the first chapter. It states, underestimating yourself is a huge liability. When others see your value and you don't, you step into dangerous territory, a realm of intense manipulation, exploitation, and vicious attacks. Not aware of your value, you will be disarmed by these ambushes. However, when you become aware of your value, these attacks will not be a surprise, and you will anticipate them and move accordingly. Exclusivity and limited access can be better understood with respect to value assessment. Whatever you cherish and value, you must protect. In reference to the chessboard, know your king and protect it at all costs. And the points in the book talking about, not underestimating yourself because it becomes dangerous, and also figuring out what it is that is valuable that you bring to the table and protecting it at all costs as if it was a king on the chessboard. It's parallel to Paris' story in this movie, because as we could see when she agreed to associate herself with Alvin, it was fine. Everything was peachy keen in the beginning, but as soon as he felt like he got what he wanted, he started to forget where he came from. And the downside of it was this. He was moving up the ranks, if we're referencing the chessboard, and she was slowly but surely being moved down. So this is kind of synonymous to like the essence of destiny swapping, except for in this movie, it was more so like in a romantic capacity, but it ended up seeping into her friendships as well. And that's when she started to witness a lot of the betrayals. So as I stated before, the reason why those sections of the book were super significant is because there may be instances where we don't necessarily value a particular characteristic or trait within ourselves, or we haven't necessarily perceived the value, better yet. But it's in these interactions where someone is propositioning us or they're posing some kind of threat to us in that area. We take note of the source of that friction so that we can avoid these kinds of circumstances.
You can't always have it your way.
So as I mentioned earlier in the analysis, things started to take a turn for the worse. And an area that honestly started to bring a lot of friction in Paris's life was her friendships. So in that clip, that was Paris confronting her quote unquote so-called friend Yvonne, I believe that was her name in the movie, about messing with Alvin, even though in the beginning when she brought Alvin to the table, this friend group was the main source of judging her and being like, oh my gosh, this is going to ruin our reputation. This is not a good look. And then the friend, as soon as Paris was pretty much on a downward spiral, or it appeared that way, this quote unquote friend capitalized on her area of vulnerability. And I want to actually read another section in the book that highlights this type of envious person. And this envious archetype is listed as the substitute. And it states, this is the individual who conveniently talks their targets of envy out of environments, opportunities, and relationships. However, they do so to substitute for the person they are convincing. The key is to convince their target of envy that it's not appealing in hopes of backdooring and taking on the opportunity for oneself. It's essential to not overlook this individual because their approach can rapidly transmute into a superiority complex, aiming to position their subjects of envy in positions of inferiority with no remorse. So because Paris let her guard down, she ended up being subject to vicious betrayals, not just from Alvin, but from somebody within her own camp, her own quote-unquote friend group. As stated before, even if you don't necessarily put your favorable assets and attributes on a pedestal, you have to be mindful of people who do. So, as the book mentioned earlier, these types of betrayals can be prevented or even combated by simply understanding how important it is for you to protect whatever brings value to your life. And this can be done by exercising exclusivity. And this isn't always limited to physical distance, right? The fact of the matter is this: Paris wasn't in a position to where she could really establish physical distance with these people. She had to interact with them on a frequent basis. They were in high school together. They had classes together with her peers. They were on the drill team together. So establishing exclusivity can also look like you creating emotional and mental distance. And what I mean by that is you don't necessarily have to call someone that you're constantly engaging with, or better yet, treat them as if they're your friend when they're showing you that they have the opposite intentions for you. To expand on this point, I want to read it from another section in the book titled "Call Them a Friend, Move Like They're an Enemy." And the section that I want to read from states, "Get into the habit of saying they are your friend, but move as if they are your enemy. Be kind to this person, compliment them, and be as pleasant as possible. Yet when they attempt to connect with you on a personal level, kindly decline. The goal is to make them feel as if they have access to you, when in reality, they do not." And I believe that this is what made Paris vulnerable in the movie. She really believed that these people were her friends, and she didn't understand the fact that their association with her was simply transactional. And the same thing applied with Alvin. She developed feelings for him, which made her vulnerable, even though he was upfront as far as, well, if you pretend to be my girlfriend, it's going to make me popular, which was yet again another transactional request. It's also important to note that her actual boyfriend, even though it seemed like they were on the same playing field, even his relationship with Paris was transactional because it benefited his image. So all in all, Paris, being our muse in this analysis, teaches us that being popular, being privileged, whatever your, attribute is that you bring to the table and other people assess it as valuable, whatever it may be, you have to understand that those attributes do not always act as a protective measure. Sometimes they make you pray. All right, babes, so that's all that I have for this analysis today with our beautiful muse, Paris Morgan, from the movie Love Don't Cost a Thing. Please feel free to share your comments, your experiences, and your opinions in the comment section below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking to you guys in the next one. Take care.